Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 864 for the 27th of April 2025. From a very soggy and grey and rainy Sydney, Australia, this is Richard Saunders. And a big thank you to Kat McLeod, our reporter in Edmonton, Canada, who filled in for me last week. I was struck down with bronchitis. It's not fun. It really is not fun. So Kat stood in for me last week, and I really appreciate that. And Kat, you did a great job. Coming up on this week's show, we look at a flyer given out or sent out or posted out in 1984 by the Australian Skeptics, challenging people who thought they had psychic power of the day. And this comes from the archives of Peter Hogan in Victoria, who has been keeping lots of historical goodies when it comes to the activities of Australian skeptics over decades. And I think we'll be raiding his archives again in the near future. Anyway, what were the Australian skeptics saying to so-called psychics or people who think they have psychic powers, or know damn well they don't, all those decades ago? Find out at the top of the show. And following that, it's the Book of Tim with Tim Mendham, and this will be the beginning of a series about Alfred Russel Wallace, an overview of his life and career. And for those who think, oh, I know that name, that's vaguely familiar, what's that all about? Well, he was an English naturalist, explorer, geographer, anthropologist, biologist, and illustrator. He independently conceived the theory of evolution through natural selection. And his 1858 paper on the subject was published that year alongside extracts from Charles Darwin. And I'm sure my dear friend Dr. Eugenie Scott will get an awful lot out of this series. Part 1 today on the Book of Tim. Following that, it's the Australian Skeptics Newsletter, read by Adrienne Hill, who happened to record this on the high seas on the Pacific Ocean. So not only is this the Australian Skeptics Newsletter, it also includes Adrienne's insights about her travel across the Pacific. Then to round off the show, in the TROVE Archives, we look at references way back in 1988 to the New Age. Yes, those of you who thought the New Age was new, well, it's rather old hat by now, as Randy used to say. I think that's what he used to say. It's been around for decades. And I guess it's a term you really don't hear much anymore. It's still out there. Anyway, find out about the New Age way back in 1988. Now, as Kat McLeod mentioned on last week's episode, the Skeptic Zone TikTok channel has, well, it's gone a little bit viral, I guess. It's got many thousands of hits. And I've put up little snippets of James Randi, for example, testing water divining. And indeed, just last night, I uploaded spoon bending from Skeptics in the Pub here in Sydney. I recorded 18 years ago, a video I made and had in the archives I hadn't seen for many years. It's great to see the people 18 years ago who were at Sydney Skeptics in the Pub bending spoons. Anyway, check out the channel. Go to skepticzone.tv. Right at the top of the page, you'll see the TikTok link. And of course, I invite you to subscribe and comment on the videos you find there. I've taken the liberty of also adding lots of origami videos to my TikTok channel, so you can see me folding and teaching you how to fold all sorts of things. So today is day 3 of a long weekend here in Australia to commemorate the Anzac Day. It's the day we remember our war veterans, and the Anzacs, Australian and New Zealand Army Corps, stems from World War I. And I know a lot of my friends certainly value having time, a 3-day weekend time at home maybe. And a big shout out to my teacher friends. But now it's time for me to run downstairs. And you know what? Somebody gave me a little Easter house if there's such a thing with bunny rabbits you can make out of Kit Kats. I think I need to construct that, then eat it. While I'm doing that, I hope you enjoy The Skeptic Zone. I think it was around about 1964 or 1965 when James Randi, during a radio interview, and I think he was in New York at the time, trying to piece together what Randi told me many years ago. I think it's documented anyway, where he was challenged to put his money where his mouth is by a psychic or something like this, and Randi did. On the spot, he wrote a check. I think it was for $10,000. And that was the start, as far as I can imagine, that was the start of skeptics putting forward money to challenge psychics. Or, in other words, we put our money where our mouth is. And as Randi said, for decades, he would gladly give up the money if it meant that science would discover something new. In fact, here's a clip from the documentary James Randi in Australia from 1980 of Randi expressing these sentiments.
Now, you've got $10,000 and there are two Australian businessmen who've each got $10,000. That's $30,000 for anyone who can successfully demonstrate the paranormal.
That's right.
How confident are you of keeping your money?
Well, let me see now. I'll show you the check. I've carried this check around now. This one has only been carried since June 25th, 1980. I have to renew it every now and then. I don't know about your banks, but every 6 months a check like this goes dead. You see, it's no longer valid. For 15 years, this is the 15th year, I've carried a check around like this in this tired little old wallet. That check for $10,000, I've never had to give up 5 cents of it so far. That doesn't mean that I won't. It doesn't mean that I'm not willing. I can lose $10,000, but I would gladly surrender that $10,000 if I were given evidence of one paranormal ability of any kind, because it would open my universe much larger than it is. It's a wonderful universe I live in. I enjoy life from day to day. I have my ups and downs like everyone else, but I think it is a wonderful world that we live in. I don't need miracles of a semi-religious nature, as they put it, in order to make my world any better. But to be offered something like that, to know that a person could float in the air, could find concealed water underground, could bend a spoon by merely thinking about it, that would make my universe 100 times bigger than it is, and all the more marvelous. It would be worth $10,000.
Fast forward to 1984. Now, recently I've been digitizing lots of skeptical archives from Melbourne, where Peter Hogan, a long-time Victorian skeptic, has, luckily for us, has saved lots of documentation from decades past. And it has been a wealth of really good material. And one of the things he saved from all those years ago was a paper here, a flyer, a double A4 page, an invitation to all psychics in Australia. So let's find out what the skeptics over 40 years ago were offering. The Australian Skeptics is the Australian chapter of the Committee for the Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal, SciCoP, a worldwide organisation of scientists and researchers who are skeptical of paranormal claims. SciCoP is the largest and best-known group of its kind in the world. And I think it's fair to say that these days and for many years, Australian skeptics don't regard themselves as a chapter of anything. It's really an independent entity, anyway. We Australian skeptics support the testing of paranormal claims, but are unconvinced by any of the supposed proofs of psychic powers that have been presented to date. We are committed to finding out the truth about so-called psychic powers, whatever that truth may be. Nothing would be more exciting than to discover the existence of genuine psychic power, if such an ability exists. However, experience has shown that the field of psychic research is so filled with self-delusion, evasion, and fraud that we are skeptical that any genuine paranormal powers exist. And I think that's probably a fair statement to this very day. The the field is filled with self-delusion, evasion, and fraud, so I don't think anybody could blame us for being somewhat skeptical. We hereby issue the following challenge to any and all psychics and psychic researchers in Australia. Show us just one psychic occurrence of any kind that can be demonstrated to be genuine under controlled conditions. Now, I must say that term, controlled conditions, although it's fair and appropriate in these circumstances, did and probably still does have unfortunate ramifications. It's not taken well by those we are challenging. They assume that means that the skeptics control what happens, such as control the outcomes, which of course doesn't happen. It just means that the conditions are such that it prevents fraud, anything like that. Claims of psychic powers are abundant, but we want to see and test someone who can demonstrate a genuine paranormal ability, such as psychic, including astrological predictions, clairvoyance, telepathy, telekinesis, psychic surgery, mediumship, levitation, water and metal divining, or ESP. ESP, of course, a term you don't hear much anymore. Think of the tremendous recognition and prestige that would be given to the first person to convince Australia's most outspoken skeptics of the reality of psychic powers. Think also of the benefit to humanity and science if the existence of miraculous powers for healing and attaining knowledge could at long last be proven. You will be the first person to successfully demonstrate such powers under controlled scientific conditions. I remember one psychic telling me that they'd never do that because then they would be the subject of great scrutiny from scientists all around the world, and they would be dissected or put into a secret lab or abducted or something like that. And my reply was, but this is what you advertise. You know, you say you can talk to the dead. You know, you're upfront about it. So anyway, if you are a psychic, it is also to your financial advantage to prove your claim, as there is a reward of $20,000 put up by patrons of the Australian Skeptics, Philip Adams and Dick Smith, for such proof. And to give you an idea, that's approximately $75,500 in today's money. Conditions. 1. We require each claimant that she submits a claim in writing to the National Committee of the Australian Skeptics. The claim must include a letter from a responsible person, such as a teacher or a police officer, that the effect has been witnessed. I think that clause was put in to stop people just writing in endlessly that they can do something mystical or magical and we should give them the money. 2. A preliminary test will be carried out by the State Committee of the Skeptics in which the claimant resides if feasible. If not feasible by the State Committee, then this test will be carried out by the National Committee. 3. If the claimant passes the preliminary test, then a final test will be carried out by the National Committee. And of course, famously, at no stage in the past 4.5 decades has anybody ever passed the preliminary test. 4. The protocol, the detailed procedure for the testing, will vary according to the claim and will be drawn and agreed by all parties in advance of testing. The protocol will be examined by professional to check for fraud and fakery. I guess that should have read professionals anyway. 5. All costs are to be borne by the claimant unless other arrangements have been agreed in advance. 6. A public record will be kept of all inquiries, applications, and testings. For examples of testings already conducted, read the following issues of The Skeptic. Volume 1, Number 1, Psychic Surgery. Volume 1, Number 2, Pendulum Divining. Well, that might be worth a book of Tim one day. Volume 2, Number 3, Water and Metal Divining. Volume 3, Number 2, Telepathy. That was page 1. Page 2 says, National Register of Australians claiming to have paranormal powers or abilities. Could you imagine that register today? It would be thousands. There are thousands of people in this country who claim to have paranormal abilities. Just the the psychics alone, the tarot readers, and so on. The Australian Skeptics are keen to locate Australians claiming to have paranormal powers or abilities so they can be notified of our, quote, an invitation to all psychics in Australia, end quote. The Australian Skeptics are also keen to investigate claims of paranormal powers or abilities in the field and publish the results of their investigations. If you believe you have psychic powers or abilities, or if you know of someone who claims to have psychic powers or abilities, please complete and return this form to the Secretary, Australian Skeptics, Box 1555P, GPO Melbourne, 3001. Please include as much information as is available, including press cuttings, audio tapes, videotapes. Nostalgia. And the information asked for is your name, your address, claimant's name, claimant's address, paranormal powers claimed, mark, clairvoyance, telepathy, telekinesis, levitation, mediumship, astrology, other psychic predictions, psychic surgery, water or metal divining, ESP, or other. Donation or fee usually charged. Has the person had training as a magician? Yes, no, not known. Has the person been handed or posted a copy of, quote, an invitation? Yes, no, not known. If yes, date handed or mailed. By whom handled or mailed? Has the person volunteered to be scientifically tested for his/her claim by the Australian Skeptics? Yes, no, not known. Any other information? It says here at the bottom, supplement to the Skeptic, September 1984. So I guess this went out within the covers of the magazine 41 years ago almost. Now compare that to the more simplified version we have today, just to get people's interest, which comes in the form of a novelty check based on the one that used to be put out by the James Randi Educational Foundation, which I thought was a very good idea at the time. So I designed one to sort of mimic it, I guess. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. And it's a giant novelty check. Australian Skeptics Inc. $100,000 prize. Paid to the order of $100,000. Since 1980, Australian Skeptics has offered a cash prize to anyone who can demonstrate a paranormal or psychic ability or powers unknown to science. Apply in writing, telling us the following clearly and concisely. 1. What exactly is your claim? 2. Under what conditions can you perform or demonstrate your claim? 3. What success rate do you expect? We will work with you to design a test you can easily pass if you have the abilities you claim. For more information, contact us at www.skeptics.com.au. And the check here, which I have, comes with a QR code, which takes you to the web page at Australian Skeptics, which outlines the challenge. And if I remember correctly, picking up my phone here and reaching for my camera to scan, there we go. I'll click the link that comes up, the QR code, and the page says the $100,000 challenge. The Australian Skeptics challenge people who claim to have extraordinary powers to demonstrate their ability under test conditions. We offer a cash prize of $100,000. And it goes on with information about the challenge. And indeed, that page also has the same novelty check you can download and hand out to your favorite psychic. And I'll add a link to that exact URL in this week's show notes. But to get there quickly, you just go to skeptics.com.au/about/activities/challenge. So there we are. And as is public record, since the inception of Australian Skeptics, roughly late 1980, 1981, depending on how you date it, we've had many people apply, of course, and nobody has walked away with 1 cent of skeptics challenge money, which is the case around the world. And it sort of gives you a clue, I think, as to why skeptical groups remain skeptical.
This is James Randi, and you're listening to The Skeptic Zone.
And now, a reading from the Book of Tim with Tim Mendham.
Hi, my name is Tim Mendham. I'm the Editor and Executive Officer for Australian Skeptics Inc. And today I'll be reading from the Skeptic magazine, which is volume 44, number 2. It's an article we called Unnatural Selection, and it's written by yours truly. Now, this is a fairly long article. You can read the whole thing on our website as the special preview article. That's in the for this particular issue. Can't get the whole issue, but you can get the preview. This is part 1 of a 5-part series, but it's about someone named Alfred Russel Wallace. Alfred Russel Wallace will always be the other developer of the theory of evolution by natural selection. And for most members of the public, it will be a surprise that there was ever anyone apart from Darwin who should be justly and widely acknowledged for what has been described as one of the shattering ideas of science. It wasn't always that way. The Alfred Russel Wallace Memorial Fund says that, quote, by the time of his death, Wallace was probably the world's most famous scientist, but since then his intellectual legacy has been overshadowed by Darwin's, largely thanks to the Darwin industry of recent decades. This industry has led to a highly Darwinocentric view of the history of modern biology, and as a result, many of the important contributions made by Darwin's contemporaries, like Wallace, are currently underestimated and undervalued. While Wallace himself might have been slightly more gracious than that account, and Darwin would readily acknowledge his colleague and rival, it is true that the Wallace industry has not been as successful in promoting its hero as that of Darwin, and certainly so outside of academic circles. While Wallace has the Wallace Line named after him, a biogeographical boundary that distinguishes forms of life in the East Indies and Australasia, Darwin has mountains, glaciers, craters on the Moon and Mars, foundations, towns and even one capital city. There is an imposing statue of Darwin seated on the grand stairway of the British Natural History Museum facing you as you enter. A portrait of Wallace was pulled out of storage in 2013, the centenary of his death, and hung to the right and up the stairs of Darwin's statue. There was no statue of Wallace in the museum until that year. The centenary led to a lot of soul searching, not to mention record searching. There had been a statue planned, but the First World War interrupted that process, and they really couldn't get around to it for another 100 years. Eventually one was commissioned, showing the man looking into the trees for a butterfly with net in hand. It was originally installed outside the Darwin Centre No. 2 building, which houses many tens of thousands of Wallace's insect specimens near a wildlife garden, but it has since been moved to the end of the second-floor corridor above the museum's Heinz Hall, where few visitors to the museum see it. In other words, the statue is as overlooked as Wallace is himself. It is perhaps indicative that while Darwin lies buried in Westminster Abbey, probably against his wishes, Wallace lies under a strangely phallic-looking fossilised tree stump in a graveyard in the small town of Broadstone, as per his wishes. He does also have a crater on the Moon named after him, but Darwin's is close to 5 times larger. All of which is in line with Wallace's upbringing, early career and eventual attitude to authority. Unlike Darwin's privileged background, Wallace grew up in modest circumstances in rural Wales and then in Hertford, England. The 8th of 9 children, his formal education was limited to 6 years at the one-room Hertford Grammar School. Wallace's parents belonged to the Church of England, but early on he showed a lack of enthusiasm for organised religion, which became more pronounced when he was exposed to secular teachings at a London Mechanics Institute, the Hall of Science, off Tottenham Court Road. Living in London with his brother John, an apprentice carpenter, the 14-year-old Wallace became familiar with the lives of tradesmen and labourers, and he shared in their efforts at self-education. Here Wallace read treatises and attended lectures by Robert Owen, the father of the British socialist movement, that formed the basis of his religious scepticism and his reformist and socialist political philosophy. The iconoclastic free thinking he learned here served him well in later years, as much as it would also lead him astray. In 1837, Wallace became an apprentice in the surveying business of his eldest brother William, and for approximately 8 of the next 10 years he surveyed and mapped in Bedfordshire and then in Wales. He lived among farmers and artisans and saw the injustices suffered by the poor. As a surveyor, Wallace spent a great deal of time outdoors, both for work and pleasure. An enthusiastic amateur naturalist, he read widely in natural history and political economy, including works by Charles Darwin, Thomas Malthus and Robert Chambers, who was the initially anonymous author of Vestiges of the Natural History of Creation, 1844, a popular science book that advocated an evolutionary origin for the solar system, the Earth and living things. And notice that was before Darwin on the origin of species. Wallace travelled to Brazil as a self-employed collector of specimens, most of which he lost on his voyage back to England in a fire on board the ship. He and the crew spent 10 days adrift before being rescued. Nonetheless, those journals of these expeditions that he had saved won him acclaim from the Royal Geographical Society, which helped to fund his next collecting venture in the Malay archipelago, where he would develop his version of the theory of natural selection. Sir James Brooke was another supporter of Wallace who was instrumental in bringing him to the East Indies, where he would develop his theory. The so-called White Rajah of Sarawak was a British soldier and adventurer who founded the Raj of Sarawak in Borneo, ruling from 1841 until his death in 1868. In April 1853, Brooke wrote to Wallace to assure him that he would be very glad to see him at Sarawak. This invitation proved to be very significant as it helped Wallace decide on the Malay archipelago for his next expedition, an expedition that lasted for 8 years and established him, according to Wikipedia in a fairly breathless description, as one of the foremost Victorian intellectuals and naturalists of the time. Wallace was similarly breathless in his own description of Brooke. In his book, The Malay Archipelago, which came out in 1869, he refers to Brooke's many admirable qualities which he possessed, and especially to his having convinced the native population by every action of his life that he ruled them not for his own advantage but for their good. Wallace acknowledged that not everyone saw Brooke in the same light he did. By those who knew him not, he may be sneered at as an enthusiast adventurer or abused as a hard-hearted despot. In fact, Brooke had become the centre of controversy in 1851 when accusations against him of excessive use of force against the native people under the guise of anti-piracy operations ultimately led to the appointment of a commission of inquiry in Singapore in 1854, which dismissed the charges. But Wallace saw otherwise. The universal testimony of everyone who came in contact with him in his adopted country, whether European, Malay or Dayak, will be that Rajah Brooke was a great, a wise and a good ruler, a true and faithful friend, a man to be admired for his talents, respected for his honesty and courage, and loved for his genuine hospitality, his kindness of disposition and his tenderness of heart. Wallace was, generally, nothing if not kind-hearted himself, and willing to see the best in everyone, often to his own disadvantage. That's the end of part 1 of the story of Alfred Russel Wallace, as appears in the Skeptic magazine, volume 44, number 2. In part 2, we'll start looking at those issues of disadvantage that Wallace faced.
This is Susan Gerbic from Psychics Explained. That's the YouTube channel where we discuss and analyze in great depth all those people who say that they can speak to the dead, all those readings, how they look like they're actually communicating with people. Why do people fall for this? There's a reason. It's much more complicated than you would think. Come to my channel, watch our videos. We would love to have you become part of our conversation. Just visit us on YouTube at Psychics Explained or Psychic Sex Plained on YouTube.
Hello everybody, this is Adrienne Hill from Shipboard Studios, and I'm 200 nautical miles south of Hawaii. I am on an incredible adventure crossing the international dateline and the equator, and I have the certificates to prove it. Now this is newsletter number 220. Now, don't forget, you can sign up to this newsletter at skeptics.com.au and get the full report, complete with all the links every other week right into your inbox. But let's see what Tim Mendham has for us this week. Hi all, says Tim. Easter is behind us, and strangely, we didn't notice a glut of resurrection conspiracies. Perhaps the Blue Origin hoax took the wind out of everyone's sails. Then again, there is room for one conspiracy. Conservative Vance visits liberal Pope. Pope dies. Coincidence? Meanwhile, how long will we have to wait until someone claims they psychically predicted the Pope's death, not allowing for the fact that he had been seriously ill for a while? Actually, not that long. It was there all along, just a few hundred years ago, as apparently Nostradamus predicted it. Read on, Tim. Okay, Tim, I will do just that. And you might hear some creaking in the background. That's the rocking of the ship on the ocean. It's been medium seas the whole way, so nothing calm, nothing crazy, but constant. Skepticon 2025. Skepticon, the Australian Skeptics annual national convention, will be returning to Melbourne for the 12th time this year on the weekend of the 3rd to 5th of October. The 41st convention will be held at the Forum Theatre, University of Melbourne. Keep your eyes on the website for more details as they are announced, including the Friday night social and Saturday night dinner. Labour vows to bring naturopathy back if they win the upcoming federal election. And there's a proposed revision to the list of treatments that private health insurers can cover on the public purse that may give naturopathy an unwarranted boost. Kennedy's pseudoscience to justify delaying vaccine approval. Grr. The U.S. HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. inaccurately said single antigen vaccines don't protect against respiratory diseases. But what's a little misinformation between friends? Telepathic children. This is an in-depth look at the Telepathy Tapes, a popular podcast that looks at, quote, the existence of telepathy in young people with non-verbal autism, end quote. But, quote, several specialists warn of the dearth of scientific evidence and the potential to create harmful myths for families living with this disorder, end quote. This is a good summary of the issues around a very dodgy claim. U.S. online psychic reading market steadily grows. The U.S. online psychic reading market is experiencing significant growth. Quote, driven by advancements in technology, evolving consumer preferences, and and the increasing acceptance of alternative forms of spirituality, end quote. With a projected market value of $338 million by 2024, the industry is expected to grow at a compound annual growth rate of 5.9% from 2024 to 2031, reaching $521 million by the end of the forecast period. One of the primary factors contributing to the market's expansion is the growing integration of AI technologies in psychic readings. By 2028, it is predicted that 30% of psychic consultations will involve AI-driven tools, i.e., algorithms and making it up. With 50% of psychic platforms incorporating these features by 2030. And I guess that it's going to be sooner than that. How paranormal beliefs help people cope in uncertain times. Paranormal beliefs, quote, create a sense of control, predictability, and comfort in uncertain times, end quote, according to academic studies. But that doesn't explain why some people find them more appealing than others, though recent studies are starting to offer explanations about why some people feel so drawn to the paranormal. The March 2025 issue of The Skeptic is out, featuring a look at folklore, the fun, fashions, and fakes, as well as an in-depth look at 2 cancer cure influencers in the news and on TV. Wellness Woo, Cold Heart's latest definitive proof of UFOs, at least this week's version, and a full report on Skepticon XL. You can read the article on the infamous Belle Gibson in the preview of the March issue available on our website. Learn more about our magazine and subscribe now at skeptics.com.au. Items of interest. Travel tips. Haunted accommodations for paranormal enthusiasts. Quote, test your nerves at these purportedly paranormal plagued hotels and homes, end quote, as recommended by Atlas Obscura's travel advice column. Quote, it seems every hotel and vacation rental today wants to boast a haunting, end quote. Except Australia, apparently. Apocalypse soon. Japanese psychic predicts a catastrophic tsunami in July. A psychic dubbed Japan's Baba Vanga has issued a terrifying prophecy set to wreak havoc across the world. Though we're not sure why the Japanese psychic is compared with Baba Vanga, who was blind. She was Bulgarian, and she died years ago, but is apparently still making predictions. Meanwhile, Living Nostradamus predicts terrifying prediction for 2025. Athos Salome from Brazil is often referred to as the Living Nostradamus and has issued a, quote, chilling warning about AI, end quote, saying the machines are already thinking for themselves and able to, quote, adapt and learn on their own without asking permission, end quote. Too many Terminator movies, perhaps? 5 most intriguing UFO videos of 2025. For what it's worth, mostly explicable and at least one fake, though we think it might be a tad premature to say these are the best of 2025. It's only April after all, and Ross Coulthard is bound to promise us some more earth-shattering encounters, despite the fact that none of the ones he claimed would happen early in the year feature in this list. Mysterious underwater pyramid reshapes history. Quote, sitting just 82 feet below sea level near the Ryukyu Islands of Japan, a mysterious object called the Yonaguni Monument continues to stump and astonish researchers since its discovery in 1986, end quote. Well, not exactly. This story resurfaced, after a Joe Rogan debate between a believer and an archaeologist. You can find actual information at Wikipedia. Be prepared for history not to be reshaped. And I apologize if I'm mispronouncing. I usually look these things up, but the internet here doesn't work very well. How paranormal concepts shaped historical battles. This could have been interesting, except for the fact that the discussion is based around a series of photos, accompanied by one sentence on each, many of which are only tenuously associated with battles. But apart from that... ... Scary photos of the week. A peeping Bigfoot scares a Washington vacationer. Now, what would you do if you saw Bigfoot staring at you through a cabin window? Oh, naturally, you're going to just take some fuzzy photos. And, well, that's all for the newsletter this week. And I just wanted to pass on a little bit about some of the adventures I've had aboard this ship. We had some wonderful tours from locals in lots of locations, and I'm going to talk about Lifu, New Caledonia, where a local made the claim that the juice from a nuni fruit would cure cancer and prevent disease. And when we went on to Fiji, we had 2 ports of call there. At both ports, they talked about the nuni fruit as being able to prevent disease, but they also expanded into herbal medicine. And one fellow told the story that he broke his arm when he was a kid playing rugby. And his family, unfortunately, could not afford the $50 to go to the hospital. So they went to a herbalist who apparently pushed the bone back in place, then wrapped it with leaves, and only 4 days later, he was completely cured and back playing rugby. And he also told the story that the herbalist told him that he would never break that bone again. It would be so strong. Now, we did drive by some hospitals on our tours, and it was horrifying, to be honest. They were terrible looking and run-down buildings, and they would not be able to afford to go to these buildings. Many of the islands apparently do not have hospitals. Now, I had the sense that the reason that they believed in herbal medicine so strongly is partly due to the lack of availability and affordability of medical care, and of course partly due to generations of belief. And I wasn't 100% sure if this was accurate, so I thought I would reach out to friend of the show, Ben Radford. And he responded with yes, that I had touched on a lesser-known aspect of alternative medicine. You know, it is considered to be as good as or better than regular medicine in many places. For example, in China, for centuries, medicine was pretty bad, so of course they developed traditional Chinese medicine. And not because it worked really well, but because there was nothing else better. And I certainly had this feeling when we visited these locations, these countries. And Ben went on to say that quality treatment is too expensive in many places, such as Africa, India, and South America. So it's not surprising that they choose something cheap and local, but not especially effective. And it made me really sad. It was heartbreaking, to be honest, to realize this. And the people we met, the locals, were wonderful people, and they were so excited to share their culture and their food and their way of life.
One of the most interesting things that we saw and learned about was how to catch a chicken from locals in Vanuatu, where they showed us if you throw rice on the ground and call the chickens, they can be captured under a pyramid-shaped trap made out of sticks.
I so admire the people that we met and the beauty of the countries and the culture. Until next time, this is Adrienne Hill from Shipboard Studios, somewhere on the Pacific Ocean.
There are many psychics and channelers who claim they are in contact with the Galactic Federation. But we have uncovered the truth. The Adventures of Psychic Penny and the Galactic Federation, Series 1. A daring cosmic space adventure starring Richard Saunders, Kat MacLeod, Lara Benham, Maynard, Kathy Reitmeyer, and Adrienne Hill as Psychic Penny. Search for The Adventures of Psychic Penny. Once again to go back to those archives at Trove, at trove.nla.gov.au. Of course, the resource from the National Library of Australia, full of digitised newspapers going back to the 1800s. Searchable. Millions of reports, articles, photographs, etc. at your fingertips. And we look up all sorts of things to do with the paranormal, the supernatural, alternative medicine, that sort of thing skeptics would be interested in. And this week, I thought we'd peruse the Trove Archives and other archives of other newspapers, looking for references to the New Age. What is the New Age? Well, Wikipedia refers to the New Age. The New Age is a range of spiritual or religious practices and beliefs that rapidly grew in Western society during the early 1970s. Its highly eclectic and unsystematic structure makes a precise definition difficult. Although many scholars consider it a religious movement, its adherents typically see it as a spiritual or unification of mind, body, and spirit, and rarely use the term New Age themselves. Scholars often call it the New Age movement, although others contest this term and suggest it is better seen as a milieu or zeitgeist. So yes, it's a little bit undefinable. The image here on the wiki page has that famous picture by Leonardo da Vinci of the naked man with 4 arms and 4 legs, sort of spread out a little bit like a medical diagram in a way. And superimposed on that, I guess, are chakras. Concepts, it says. 2012 phenomenon. Who remembers that? 2012. Oh man, I better do a trove on that. Other things like aura, chakra, earth changes, whatever that means, earth mysteries, energy, eternal now, higher self. A number of times I see people talking about contacting your higher self and wonder what happens if you contact your lower self. Pyramid power, soulmate, star people. List just goes on. It's all listed here as vaguely New Age. But anyway, let's turn to the pages of the Sydney Morning Herald dated the 13th of December 1988, many years ago. And who's this by? A story by Jean Norman, Jean. New Ages, floating away on crystal seas. Are you embarrassed at parties because you haven't been rebirthed? Wondering what to do with the crystal your sister gave you? Welcome to the New Age, a late 80s movement that some call, quote, the invasion of the mind snatchers, end quote. As a post-yuppie movement, it's costly and cliquey. The New Age news editor, Dennis Cooney, says, New Age people are simply people who are smart enough to be ahead of their time, it will be abnormal in the future for people not to have New Age attitudes. The overall desire of people who consider themselves to be New Age is to be happy, healthy, wealthy, and free to do whatever they choose. New Age people have their act together, both socially and internally. A perusal of the classified advertisement section of the New Age News is like being in another country or another world. Any avenue of human development seems open to you at a price. You can experience, quote, a permanent IQ boost, end quote. Visit a New Age introduction service called Compatible Connections, which uses astrology and numerology to match you with a soulmate. Make megabucks after completing a New Age money course, quote, delivering an education that traditional businesses courses dare not touch, end quote. And in just over 4 hours, learn all the skills needed to walk over red-hot coals. Here are some of the most common New Age experiences available. Crystals. The Waterford decanter set won't do. You'll require a decent quartz rock-type crystal. Crystals are male or female. Males are clear and sparkling, and females are cloudy. If you wish to develop your masculine side, which the crystal lady spoken to describes as, quote, dynamic and thrusting, end quote, get a boy crystal. If you feel you ought to be more intuitive and giving, the girl is for you. Then think about the shape, which will affect how it works. For example, a cluster crystal, which looks like lots of little pyramids huddled together, is used to cleanse the energy in a room. Apparently, the crystal acts as a, quote, holding station, end quote, for your thoughts. Thoughts are energy, and quartz crystal transfers energy, explains the crystal lady. So if you have a thought or an affirmation you want to enhance, the crystal will feed it back to you. It tunes in to your own personal frequency. Ooh, personal frequency, eh? Nothing has changed in all these years. Rebirthing is the most in-groupy of the lot. Founded by Leonard Ord over a decade ago, it is a circular breathing technique. Foremost of rebirthing's claims is that it causes profound relaxation, refocusing, and renewal of the human spirit, mind, and body. It also causes the natural sense of pleasure and relaxation to expand and encompass every past experience. It apparently results in full recall of one's birth and past lives. Rebirthing costs $70 to $90 a session, but you need at least 10 sessions and follow-up visits when something is brought up for clearing. Floating to relax. In short bursts, the treatment is supposed to relax, give clarity of mind, increase self-awareness, better imagination, and relief from aches and pains. One climbs into a tank resembling a giant coffin. It is filled with 400 litres of water at skin temperature and saturated with Epsom salts. The mind scans for stimulation once the outside stimulus is removed. If you believe that, you'll probably enjoy floating to relax. It costs about $6,000 plus delivery, salt, and installation to have one in your home, or $10 to $20 at a clinic. And I think I've mentioned before, way back in the 80s or the 90s or something, I did a couple of float tank sessions, and I found it to be most relaxing. But so's a cup of tea. Loving Relationships Training, better known as LRT, was developed by Saunders A, a Californian who loads her books with affirmations. For example, I am so-and-so and I love the beauty of the universe in its fullest expression. In case you can't think of anything nice to say about yourself, by yourself. LRT claims to help people open up more and have more of a heartfelt connection with one another. Apparently, one affects this by looking at underlying patterns in relationships like, quote, woman marries father figure, end quote, and, quote, man marries mother figure, end quote. It is supposed to enhance a perfectly normal relationship not save a floundering one. You can do this quite rapidly with an introductory one-day LRT course, $90, or go the whole hog with a weekend, $490. And that $490 back then is equal to about $1,250 in today's money. You do things such as pairing off and discussing with a stranger your life's most awkward moment, on the grounds that something shared or cleared is no longer a big deal. I wonder, listener, what your most awkward moment in life was. I wonder what my most awkward moment in life was. I can't think of anything instantly, like being caught with a towel around yourself outside a hotel room when the door shuts or something like that, but I'm sure there's something. Channeling. This is the theory that people, quote, not currently in their bodies, end quote, can speak and hold lecture tours and workshops through willing mediums or channelers. And that's still going on today, especially on TikTok, where people claim they channel the Galactic Federation. The most famous is Ramtha, yes, something from the past, who visited Sydney last year. He is apparently an ancient barbarian from Atlantis and speaks through a Chicago dentist's wife named J.Z. Knight, another name from the past. So far, nobody well-known or historically verifiable has turned up. Shirley MacLaine gets a lot of material for her autobiographies from channelers. Read Opening to Channel by Sanaya Roman and Dwayne Packer at $22.95. And if you'd like to hear what an ancient warrior can tell us about life in the late 1980s, read Ramtha, Intensive Change for Days to Come, as channeled through J.Z. Knight, $19.95. Or his book on soulmates, same price. Now, interesting, I've discovered it appears to be a few days, or should I say a couple of months. Yes, a couple of months before that story, there was another story, again in the Sydney Morning Herald, this time dated the 11th of October, 1988. New Age Thinking, the Triumph of Ravings over Reason. And this appears to be a story picked up, originally published in the Baltimore Sun. And it says here, Elsie Chisholm tries a New Age way of attaining awareness and comes up with a novel understanding. I am now going to tune into my crystal geode's vibration and get some quick cosmic energy. Years ago, my son-in-law gave me a beautiful geode. This is spelled Geode. I was not aware of this word until I looked it up. And yes, it's always a good idea to look up words you don't know, because then you just keep learning. Geode, and I hope it's pronounced that way, is a geological secondary formation within sedimentary and volcanic rocks. Geodes are hollow, vaguely spherical rocks in which masses of minerals are secluded, and photographs thereof, that's familiar. I've seen these before. They're very pretty, but they've got like a hollow part inside. She writes on, one of those spherical rocks with crystals inside that can be put on a brass stand. The other day, a New Age groupie told me that this geode is very valuable and has great healing powers. I will say it has not done anything for us in the way of better vibes and health, but then maybe it is too near the thermostat. However, the fig tree nearby is doing very well, thank you. This means I was a pioneer in crystal mania, at least on my street. Anyway, crystals have always been appreciated for their scientific properties. I once had a crystal radio. You may have crystals in your watch. From eradicating warts to relieving the symptoms of PMT, crystals are now being sold as the key to nirvana. Like many reporters, I get lots of books and magazines in the mail. Just this week, someone may be trying to tell me something. I received a magazine called Light of Mind subtitled Create Your Own Reality, and a book called The Psychic Sourcebook, How to Choose and Use a Psychic. First, Light of Mind. And that's me, all right, because I do worry about a broken lamp and a fallen soufflé more than the plight of the polar bear. The magazine is edited and published by two handsome, long-haired dudes pictured inside the cover. According to the magazine, they are top-selling New Age musicians, authors, meditation trainees, and developers of innovative techniques of self-help programs. And according to the magazine, this is their creed. Through freedom, all imposed or self-imposed limiting belief systems, we remove the veil which blocks the radiance of universal love. In this way, we create a light-filled, abundant reality of happiness for ourselves and our planet. Wow! Did someone tell me that the Me Too generation is over, or what? Light of the Mind advertises hundreds of different tapes, and they would be, of course, cassette tapes, from Beautiful Self to Crystal Consciousness. And now, the Psychic Book. We all know that Nancy Reagan had a lot to do with the psychic revolution, as did actress Shirley Out on a Limb MacLaine. These books have multiplied like bunnies. Psychic describes the benefit of crystals. Today, crystals have taken on a new meaning, as New Age adherents attribute to them everything from healing properties to encoded information from ancient civilizations. And although many people have taken to wearing crystals on certain parts of their bodies and meditating with specific colours for desired ends, the most that can be claimed for such uses is that they function as totems. That is, the personal belief in their effectiveness may empower an individual to achieve certain results, either in life or in the spiritual growth process. Hey, I wore a copper bracelet for 3 years to cure my aches. It turned my wrist green, but I liked rubbing it when I was overdrawn at the bank or in a traffic jam. After visiting a new crystal shop displaying hundreds of colourful stones in my own city and hearing that business was as good as the nearby McDonald's, I decided to go home and take another look at my geode. I dusted it, gave it a bath, a kiss, and put it under the light by my bed. I will let you know if we get together. Oh, one more thing. If it makes you feel better to have idols, totems, icons, properties of earth and water for healing purposes, go for it. If it makes you feel better to hold a crystal, even a Waterford pitcher, go for it. If hanging from a chandelier improves your health, swing, baby, swing. New Age is like old age in concept. It's mind over matter, or matter over mind, whatever helps. What a fun piece that was, all the way back there in 1988, originally published in the Baltimore Sun. And New Age is certainly the gift that keeps on giving decade after decade after decade, as we often discover at the Mind, Body, Spirit Festival. Well, there we go. A fun look at the New Age. What's new in the New Age? It's all pretty old hat. What did Randy used to say, James Randi? The New Age is the old age dusted up a bit or washed over or washed up. I can't remember. The New Age is the old age with a new hat. I can't remember. But you too can find out about the New Age, the old age, or any age you like when you go to Trove at trove.nla.gov.au. Type in your search and you never know what you might find. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Coming up on next week's show, we're going to look at psychic predictions from 1980. I wonder if they came true. 1980, 45 years ago. And given the recent death of Pope Francis, I might look at some Pope predictions. especially those from Nostradamus, as trumpeted here on Australian television way back in the late 1970s, in what we look back on now as a laughable documentary of the era. Also, coming up on next week's show, I hope to hear a little bit more from Psychic Penny. Now, Psychic Penny has been on vacation recently, but we have persuaded her to contribute some horoscopes to the Skeptic Zone. Hopefully, we might bring those to you next week. And also part 2 of the Book of Tim and his ongoing look into the life and times of Alfred Russel Wallace. Thank you to all those people who continue, after all these years, to support the Skeptic Zone at skepticzone.tv via Patreon or PayPal. With the Australian dollar still low against the US dollar, if you're in the United States, it's a great time to chip in or sign up or send some contributions the Skeptic Zone way. But for this week, from soggy Sydney, Australia, this is Richard Saunders signing off.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for episodes and show notes with links going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone on Facebook, X, TikTok and YouTube by clicking the links at our homepage, together with links to support the show financially via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are not necessarily those of the Skeptic Zone podcast or any other skeptical organisation.